The following program, Norml Show Live, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate for the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate or encourage any illegal activity and advise all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws by visiting norml.org, Norml.org. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers of Norml Show Live are their own and do not necessarily reflect the philosophy and policies of Norml. Listener discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. Then it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think we need to think if we criminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws presents Norml Show Live, Marijuana Nation. Now, here's your host, Norml's outreach coordinator, Radical Russ Belville.
Good afternoon, tokers and tokettes, and welcome. It is November 9th, 2011, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Welcome to the show. We have got all sorts of great stuff for today, your Hemp Day, Hump Day, right here from Norml's West Coast Media headquarters at Rolla J Studios in beautiful Portland, Oregon. Joining me, as always, from our virtual studio in beautiful Astoria, Oregon, is the ebullient and effervescent Cannabis Carrie.
How's it going today?
It's going very, very well. Thank you very much. The cold...
I was just going to say, you should probably get me a dictionary for Christmas.
I shall do that. The cold is starting to break. I can feel my voice starting to come back, and that's good because headed out this weekend to Atlanta, Georgia for the Capital Cannabis Revival Jam, whatever it's called. I can't remember the exact name, but it's out there in Atlanta all Saturday from noon to 10, so I hope to meet some of my southeastern followers down there. It'll be a lot of fun. Also, interesting thing happened to me today, Carrie. I was looking for color printers today to print out new copies of the big book that I've got to send out to some people. And there's one that's just down the block on Burnside. It's right by that Safeway down there on Burnside. And long story short, I found the best price. I go in to talk to the guy. He sees the book and he goes, "Oh, Norml. Hey, we do all the printing for Subcool. Do you know him?"
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so
Small world.
Yeah, so we're using Subcool's printer, which means, you know, those cool little rolling trays.
The trays.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We could get those printed up with Norml Show Live on them. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Did you chat with him about that?
Yeah, I sure did. And he said we can make anything that we can come up with that's foldable. I'm going to look online for origami stash box. See if we can get something you can fold up. You know when somebody wants to give you a bud at a festival and you got nothing to put it in? I mean, wouldn't that be cool?
Perfect. I
think
so.
We'll get to that. But first, we got to get to all the news that's happening today. So we start with Cannabis Carrie and our hemp headlines. What's in the news today?
Well, we do have a lot of news today. It's an off election year, but there are plenty of elections going on around the country. So we're going to cover all kinds of election news. And also we're going to go right to the Supreme Court and cover a really interesting case at the Supreme Court that we should all be interested in. That all coming up on the hemp headlines today.
All right. Also, I've been doing a little bit of research. This whole Occupy movement has been going on, and I wanted to find out how much overlap there was between the drug war and Occupy. I kind of brought it up with Ethan Nadelman yesterday. And so I did some research. I'll bring some of that to you in the news today as well. Now, normally we'd have Dr. Mitch Earlywine on the show, but he's in surgery today, just some routine surgery today, so he can't be with us. So joining us today for Cannabis Science will be Paul Armentano. He's got some great studies to talk about opiates and marijuana use. Plus, I've got some research on OxyContin that'll blow your mind. And at the end, we've got some time for a rant. We're going to talk about weed maps, so stick around. This should get interesting. We're right back after this.
This is Norml Show Live, the voice of the Marijuana Nation.
The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. Please do not give up your precious liberties. There's nothing wrong with standing up for our constitutional rights, and in fact, it's the only way to honor the Constitution that gives us these precious rights.
Treat law enforcement with respect and respect the Constitution by standing up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, stand up for your rights by repeating, I respectfully invoke all of my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search or seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak with my attorney, Omar Figueroa. Omar Figueroa has more than a decade of experience in federal and California courts and graduated from Yale University, Stanford Law School, and Trial Lawyers College. Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at www.omarfigueroa.com.
Tjena, jag heter David, PKA Dirtball. Vi ska röka hela tiden, alla år.
Weedmaps.com. I'm Radical Russ from Norml. In my job as outreach coordinator, I travel every month, and when I'm on the road, I need a fast, accurate way to find the medical marijuana dispensaries in the area. So I turn to Weedmaps.com. Weedmaps.com has the best dispensary locator online or on your mobile device. Search by zip code or let Weedmaps find you, and in seconds you'll have the addresses, phone numbers, and customer service reviews for the medical marijuana dispensaries in the local area. Weedmaps.com also has a section devoted to helping you find a doctor who understands and recommends medical marijuana under your state's law. You can even check prices on the Medical Marijuana Stock Exchange. Coming soon, you'll even be able to find the listings of Norml attorneys and chapters, local head shops and grow shops, and the best weed-friendly businesses. Weedmaps.com has the information you need to be an informed cannabis consumer. Visit Weedmaps.com today, a proud sponsor of the Norml Network.
Inhaling deeply of the sacred smoke.
Medical marijuana, industrial hemp, consumer cannabis. It's time for this week's Norml News with Cannabis Carrie.
Even on off election years, we still have cannabis questions making their way onto the ballots of special elections around the country. First up, we have Kalamazoo, Michigan, that had a ballot measure to amend the city charter and codify marijuana as the lowest priority for law enforcement. Kalamazoo certainly isn't the first community to do so, and other communities that have tried this type of voter-forced decriminalization measure have been challenged. Still, the margin of victory in Kalamazoo of voters who would like every other crime in the city to be put ahead of going after cannabis consumers was significant. The measure passed with 65% of the voters approving it. In the counts so far, there are 4,649 votes for the measure and only 2,416 against it. The group behind the effort is the Kalamazoo Coalition for Pragmatic Cannabis Laws. They pointed out that the margin of victory happened to be the same percentage of that passed in Michigan's Medical Marijuana Act of 2008 at 65% of Kalamazoo voters. The Michigan Medical Marijuana Act passed statewide by 63%. The ballot question voters approved was asked, shall the Kalamazoo City Charter be amended such that the use and or consumption of 1 ounce or less of usable marijuana by adults 21 years or older is the lowest priority of law enforcement personnel? Even though voters resoundingly said yes, the Kalamazoo City Attorney Clyde Robinson and Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety Chief Jeff Hadley have said it will have no practical effect because the city charter only addresses ordinances. They also wanted to point out to the citizens of Kalamazoo that marijuana possession and use are illegal under the state law, which officials say they have every obligation to continue to enforce state and federal laws. Another low enforcement policy went to the voters in a town in the state of Washington. Strangely enough, Tuesday's election count in Washington also passed a lowest enforcement priority ballot measure, and also by the favorable 65%. Initiative 1 in Tacoma easily passed in part, said the backers, to protect legal medical marijuana patients from potential legal consequences. Initiative 1 in Tacoma was modeled after the Seattle lowest enforcement priority cannabis policy that was passed in the city back in 2003. The Seattle initiative was promoted as a cost-cutting measure to make the most of police resources. But in answer to the new law, Tacoma law enforcement officials there also say they don't target pot offenses and that the measure likely won't change anything.
Yeah, we don't really go after people who smoke pot. Not at all. This really doesn't mean anything. Now, who is it that makes the rules for these cops? Isn't it we the people here? You know, this cop out from Hadley saying, well, it doesn't have any impact, only has an impact on city ordinances. We don't have any existing city ordinances relative to the possession of use or of marijuana, and we still have every obligation to enforce state and federal laws. Look, low priority doesn't mean that we're saying as a cop, as a city cop, if you catch someone and they got weed on them that you're not, supposed to bust them. I mean, we understand that as police officers, your job is to enforce the law, and even if the law sucks, you've got to enforce it. The idea of low priority is to express the will of the people that the police department don't actively go out and seek out marijuana consumers. Yes, if you come upon one and in the course of dealing with one, have to arrest or cite the person, of course, that's within your job description. It's within the law, the way it's written, and that's what we're trying to change. Low priority means that you don't actively go out and seek them. You don't set up stings. You don't set up operations. You don't cooperate with these sorts of things, and that's what the people want in Kalamazoo and in Tacoma. It's time to start obeying the will of the people here.
And in other election news, Solano County, California voters approved a local measure that would tax any marijuana business with the money going to city services. Those voters voted to heavily tax marijuana businesses, but rejected a citywide sales tax. Measure C to tax marijuana businesses was passed by 76% of the vote, but Measure B to allow the city to collect a measly 1% sales tax failed by just 64 votes. And in Washington state, voters were asked to consider privatizing the state's liquor sales system. Last year, they tried a similar referendum that failed. But this time, the pro-alcohol sale lobbyists came up with 1183, called the Costco Initiative, that would end the control of the state liquor system. Washington is one of only 8 states left that does not have some kind of privatization of alcohol sales on their books, a leftover policy from the post-prohibition era. 1183 looks like it will pass easily, so beginning on June 1st, Washington grocery stores can sell liquor thanks in part to the $22.7 million that Costco Wholesale gave to kick the state out of the liquor business. That's the largest single donation ever given to a voter initiative in state history. The campaign now, they only spent $18.5 million, and campaign leaders said that extra $4 million difference will be returned, we're guessing, to Costco. Costco did donate that money to the campaign, and so beginning June 1st, grocery stores in Washington can sell liquor.
Yeah, living here in Portland, we got bombarded by ads, yes and no on 1183 ads day and night, because Vancouver's just north of us, just right across the river. And it always cracked me up that part of the opposition to this was, this election is being bought by Costco. Yeah. It's like Costco, that awful, terrible place where I can go get really cheap stuff in bulk, and a place that pays their employees pretty well. They've got good benefits, I understand, compared to some of the other places out there like Sam's Club and so on. So that kind of cracked me up. But I'm pleased by the Washington initiative, because what it does, I think it gets people out of the idea that there needs to be a government monopoly over the production of these substances. And I think that can only help as we're moving into 2012 in Washington and looking at an initiative that would create a commercialized system of marijuana distribution. With the state out of the liquor distribution business, they're going to be eager to get into another distribution business that might bring in some revenue to them. And I think the taxation of marijuana may be just what they're looking for. And in this other one, this Measure C that we had in Solano there, they'll overwhelmingly pass a tax on pot, and thus using marijuana, but they can't pass a sales tax on everyone. It just shows you how, as long as we're still discriminated against, we have to pay these so-called sin taxes like alcohol and tobacco, that a lot of the people in that county aren't really buying the idea that this is purely medical.
A case being argued at the Supreme Court this week involves evolving law enforcement policies on police surveillance. The case involves a man who government agents put a GPS device unknowingly on his car. Now, they tracked his movement for a month, 24 hours a day, as he drove around Washington, D.C. He was eventually arrested for drug trafficking. It seems that a majority of the justices feel strongly that the officer should have obtained a warrant first. Now, the argument is centered around the nature of whether movement in a vehicle on a city street is public in nature. With technology fast outpacing policies, it is simple to gather an enormous amount of information with computers now. The growing sophistication of monitoring equipment makes it possible to follow a suspect's every movement in real time, knowing their whereabouts 24 hours a day. The man in the Supreme Court case, Antoine Jones, was a co-owner of a nightclub in Washington, and he was suspected of trafficking cocaine. He was tracked for more than a month before officers finally found him with $850,000 in cash and almost 100 kilograms of cocaine. Now, he was sentenced to life in prison for that crime. But the court is being asked to decide if such pervasive surveillance violates the Fourth Amendment and whether it is a search, a seizure, or both. We have the right to be secure in in our persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. The justices have another pending case that we told you about earlier this year on the same matter. In Oregon, police attached a GPS device to Juan Pineda Moreno's Jeep while it was parked on his property. Officers then tracked him to a remote marijuana field that he was helping cultivate, and he was convicted and sentenced to more than 4 years in prison. Unlike the case that they argued this week, though, a federal appeals court ruled that this was not a search, so no warrant was required to place the GPS device on his Jeep. His conviction was upheld, so now the justices may decide to take action on the Oregon appeal or possibly wait to resolve the issue with the Jones appeal from Washington first.
My God. And I think there's another case pending about police being able to use without a warrant GPS records out of your cell phone and also cell phone location records as far as tracking your every movement. And I can just imagine how some of these justices might interpret and say, well, you're in public and a person could reasonably stand on a corner and note whether or not you pass that corner every day. So how does this differ from the police being able to do that? But, you know, in order to figure out exactly what the founding fathers had intended in this, I got in my time machine. I have this special time machine that allows me to communicate with the founding fathers one at a time. It only gives me a couple of minutes, but I'll give you the information we got from Thomas Jefferson. I brought this up with Thomas Jefferson the other day. Let me see if I can get that recording to play right now. Hold on. Let me switch over to the cam there, get that switched, and yeah, let me play this recording. Hold on here. Okay, President Jefferson, enough questions about the time pod. I only have a little time to tell you about something terrible happening 2 centuries in the future. Something perhaps you can prevent by adding a few words to this Bill of Rights you're working on. See, the court decided that the state has the right to put a GPS on your car. A GPS? What is a GPS? What is a car? No, okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Jefferson, President Jefferson. In the future, I'm sorry, you're not president yet. It's so confusing. Well, first off, a car is like a horse-drawn carriage, except it needs no horse for propulsion. And almost everyone has one, and it's the primary way of moving people and goods from place to place. In our future, you really can't do business or be employed without one of these cars.
That's remarkable. And what is this GPS?
Well, it's initials. It's GPS. It's a long story, but it's a technology we have in the future that allows you to accurately track the location of anything on the planet within a few yards.
This is madness. This such thing isn't possible.
Well, Mr. Jefferson, it is. We've put men on the moon, we've harnessed the power of the sun, and we can instantly view places all over the globe.
So this GPS, what does it do exactly?
Well, it's hard to explain, but imagine that everywhere you went, there was a government clerk going with you, cataloging every location you visit and every route you took to get there and every time of the day you went. Then, imagine that the government clerk never sleeps and is invisible, and you can't possibly detect him in any way, and that the government can assign that clerk to you without your knowledge and without a court determining that there's a reasonable chance that you're breaking the law.
Tyranny! This is scarcely the philosophy of a free and just society. In this stranger's prophecy rings true, our noble experiment in liberty is extinguished in a mere 2 centuries. Surely our descendants must be an educated people. I cannot fathom our great country, founded with the blood of patriots against the tyrant of London, turning to tyrants themselves without compelling reason. For what purpose do the agents of the state seek to violate the sacred privacy of the people?
To prevent them from growing hemp.
Prevent them from growing hemp?
Well, yeah. Some Americans like to smoke the dried flowers of hemp, so our government arrests and imprisons them for cultivating it. We even force workers to surrender cups of their urine for testing to prove that they aren't smoking dried hemp flowers.
Well, hemp is of first necessity to the wealth and protection of the country.
Well, yeah, some of us are aware of that, Mr. Jefferson, but 850,000 of us are arrested over hemp every year.
Charlatan! I had set aside my skepticism to hear your tale based upon your strange dress and the odd contraption in which you arrived. But to prophesy that America would ever abandon her principles of equality and fairness to seek and punish citizens for growing hemp is an absurdity worthy of Jonathan Swift. Now leave us alone so we can protect the rights of citizens that might actually be prescribed by the state. America punishing hemp farmers? Why, that's ridiculous. What a fantastic tale. Be gone, visitor. Mr. Jefferson, please, you've got to believe me that the time is running out. I can't keep this connection much longer. It's starting to fade. Please, Mr. Jefferson, please. And there we go. That's the recording of my time travel visit with Thomas Jefferson. It was hard to explain. He couldn't believe it, but maybe next time we'll get a chance to explain to him just how much of that Bill of Rights that he's writing is getting shredded in the name of hemp. All right, folks. Hey, thanks for sticking around. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we've got some Irie Wednesday music for you with NorCal Perps, some Collie Buds on tap. Stick around.
It's 20 after the hour, and we have to take a short break, if you know what I mean. Please support these sponsors who support Norml Show Live.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would send you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
Alternative Medical Choices offers healthcare the way it should be. Easy to access, patient-centered, team-based, and quality-focused. We offer a variety of natural, affordable healthcare treatment options like primary care, group acupuncture, massage, and assistance with OMP registration. As a patient, you will have a team of experts working with you to make you the best you can be. Call Alternative Medical Choices at 503-288-5579 or check us out on the web at altmedchoices.com.
Norml Show Live. We're as much like Cheech and Chong as ordinary Americans are like the Three Stooges.
Hey, Mo! Here, Mo!
Norml stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks are far less than those posed by legal drugs.
Sir, do you think there will or should come a time for us to discuss the possibility of legalization, regulation, and control of all drugs, thereby doing away with the violent criminal market as well as a major source of funding for international terrorism? Thank you so much for your time, Mr. President.
Well, I think this is an entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Name the time and place, Mr. President. At Norml, we've been prepping for this debate for 40 years.
It's time for your daily Toker Tunes, the best in 420 friendly music from all genres that uplifts, entertains, and informs the public. Today we get tunes for Irie Wednesday, our celebration of that mellow vibe we find in the best of reggae, ska, calypso, and Latin music. If you'd like to submit your song to be played on Norml Show Live, send it to us at stash@norml.org. Now here's some more great independent marijuana music for today's Daily Toker Tune.
You can't get much more Irie than heading down to the Bay Area with our friend Kyle, a.k.a. NorCal Perps. How you feeling today?
Hey, Russ.
Hey, glad to have you here. And how's everything down there?
Not too bad, just keeping busy. I've got a migraine today, so I wasn't able to make it out to the 15th anniversary of the Prop 215. They're having a rally out in Sacramento today.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Norml and all of them were going to be out there, but I would have had to left here by, I think it was like 7, 8 o'clock, and that just wasn't happening.
Yeah, okay. Well, sorry to hear about the migraine. I'm sure you've got some good meds to take care of it.
Oh, yeah, gonna just keep puffing away on some KC Jones. We'll make it okay.
Right on. Glad to hear it. And are there any major events or expos coming to the Bay Area that you're aware of before the end of the year?
I know actually this weekend in San Jose there is going to be the another HempCon.
Oh, okay.
At the San Jose Convention Center. I might be out there Sunday. Saturday I have a wedding to go to.
All right.
So not the most appropriate thing to miss a wedding for. So
yeah, exactly. Well, you can at least pick them up a nice gift.
Yeah.
So we got the Irie Wednesday music, the best of reggae and dub and ska and Hawaiian and calypso and anything islandy. So what do you got for us today?
Well, I figured with Collie Buds being up your way tonight, he's in Bend, he's in Eugene tomorrow night, and then Friday he's in Portland, that we would go ahead and play another one of his songs.
That's a good idea. He's up at the Mount Tabor Theater here on 11/11/11 right here in Portland, Oregon. That's just maybe 20 blocks away from where we're at here at the studio. So a venue I know well.
Yeah, so if you guys get a chance, head on out there. I know he always puts on a great show.
Right on. Okay, so Collie Buds, and what song are we going to bring to him today?
Today we have a song entitled Hemp... What's the fucking song?
Herb Tree.
Yeah, Herb Tree. See, this is
See,
what
it's the migraine, man. I understand.
Yeah, you got the migraines and the meds going. It's not working today.
All right. Well, thanks, NorCal Perps, Kyle, for bringing it to us.
Thanks, Russ. You have a good one.
You too. Get well soon. This is Collie Buds with Herb Tree.
But this little fat thing, she are me darling. A little herb tree in my garden. Yeah, it love the light in the morning. If you find it offensive, take my warning. Yeah, this little fat thing, she are me darling. Me have it stashed well, in farmer can't tell. When me water the trees, look how the buds swell. No artificial light, but not the parasites. Them can't spot it from them vehicle, not them satellite. The essence of the weed, me cultivate the seed. I put the photo in High Times, no magazine. Me come to let you know, just let the sense grow. Listen up now, me people, cause you need to know. I got a little herb tree in my garden. Yeah, it love the light in the morning. If you find it offensive, beg me pardon. But this little fat thing, she are me darling. A little herb tree in my garden. Yeah, it love the light in the morning. If you find it offensive, take my warning. Yeah, this little fat thing, she are me darling. Me careful out the road, me truck back overload. And me don't want to feature punk cops episode. Me ship it off abroad, send money back a yard. But I and I got brag just through the time so hard. It's just a natural thing, like all this song I sing. Listen out for me phone, cause customers are ring. 1-800 weed hotline, for the ounce and the nickel and dime. We are promote but don't bad mind, and tell me love till the end of time. Got a little herb tree in my garden. Yeah, it love the light in the morning. If you find it offensive, beg me pardon. But this little fat thing, she are me darling. A little herb tree in my garden. Yeah, it love the light in the morning. If you find it offensive, take my warning. Yeah, this little fat thing, she are me darling.
Want a copy of that song for your iPod? Check out the Daily Toker Tunes at the Stash blog by surfing to stash.norml.org and choosing Media and then Toker Tunes from the main menu.
Hi, I'm Keith Straub, the founder of Norml. In all the years since 1970 that I've been fighting marijuana prohibition, I've learned that drug warriors love to confuse the public with statistics. Lately, they've claimed that there are more teens enrolled in drug treatment for marijuana than ever before. It's a statement that, while true, is intentionally misleading. What they don't tell you is that marijuana arrests have skyrocketed to over 800,000 arrests per year. They also don't tell you that we've gone from a few dozen drug courts in the 1990s to over 2,500 drug courts today. The kicker is that those drug courts sentence teens routinely to drug treatment for marijuana whether they need drug treatment or not. So they arrest more people for pot, require them to enter drug treatment, then claim the higher treatment numbers justify more pot arrests. It's an absurd proposition, but no more absurd than banning a plant. Learn the facts about pot. Visit norml.org today.
Look, I'm sorry, but the bill says I can't modify any existing structure. Well, I guess we could change the law to allow for medicinal marijuana to be sold just outside the door of the shop.
I don't know. Maybe the rules should be somebody can buy the medicinal weed for others.
Look, can't we skip all this and just make pot legal? Everyone is just abusing this medicinal system anyway. It's ridiculous. What's ridiculous about it?
What makes something funny? How does humor impact health and psychological well-being? How can you incorporate humor into everyday life? A concise, reader-friendly introduction to an important but often underappreciated topic in modern psychology, Humor 101 explains the role of comedy, jokes, and wit in the sciences and discusses why they are so important to understand. Psychology professor Dr. Mitch Earlywine draws from his personal experiences in stand-up comedy to focus on how humor can regulate emotion, reduce anxiety, and diffuse tense situations, expose pretensions, build personal relationships, and much more. He irreverently debunks the pseudoscience on the topic of humor and leaves readers not only funnier, but better informed. It's part of the Psych 101 series from Springer Publishing, Humor 101 by Dr. Mitch Earlywine, Ph.D.
Norml has been the place to go for the latest studies and news on marijuana science, policy, and activism. For over a decade, one man at Norml has written and reviewed more studies and news stories regarding marijuana than most anyone on the planet. First as senior policy analyst and now as deputy director, Norml's Paul Amintano has written for major newspapers, academic journals, and magazines on the subject of cannabis and is frequently requested as an expert witness in the courtroom. His knowledge and experience are an amazing asset to the cannabis community. Available to you now in a segment we call Behind the Headlines with Paul Armentano.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We are so happy to have Paul Armentano on the line, filling in for Dr. Mitch Earlywine, who is out today. Paul, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here, Russ.
All right. So, of course, this is our Cannabis Science segment, and you've been so gracious as to agree to live call-ins as well. So if you want to get a call in for Paul Armentano, the phone number here is 971-533-7111, or you can type your question via chat. Just go to our Ustream chat, and Cannabis Carry will pick that up for us. But before we get started, we always start with Dr. Mitch about some new study that's come out, and you've got one here with Dr. Abrams' study here on opiates and the use of vaporizers. Tell our listeners a little bit about it.
This is actually a really important study. It was just published in the Clinical Pharmacology and Therapeutics Journal. This is actually a journal that is under the branch of Nature, which I'm sure is a name. If there's any scientific journal your listeners may be familiar with, it's probably Nature. They're certainly one of the biggest and most prestigious. So Donald Abrams, who is a researcher at the University of California at San Francisco, and many people may know has been a long-time researcher and advocate regarding the medical marijuana issue. This is a study he'd been trying to conduct and get published for many years, and finally this is now come to light. In this particular study, the researchers took 21 subjects. They were placed in a hospital setting for 5 days. All of these subjects were on a daily regimen of either oxycodone or morphine to treat chronic pain. And over the course of this 5-day study, vaporized cannabis was also administered to these patients at different dosages throughout the 5 days. And essentially what researchers found at the end of the 5 days was that there appeared to be a synergistic effect where the pain-relieving properties of the opiates were enhanced when you had the addition of vaporized cannabis. Now, this is a synergistic effect that we had previously seen in animal model studies, but had never been replicated in a human clinical trial. So this is actually the first human study that we now have that shows that the pain-relieving effects of cannabinoids, in addition to the pain-relieving effects of opiates, seem to work in some sort of synergistic manner, even though they're clearly working on very different receptor systems in the human body.
Right, and this backs up the anecdotal information I've gotten from dozens and scores of patients out there who've told me that once they've started cannabis, just smoking marijuana, that they were able to reduce their opiate prescription loads in half to a third to a half of what they had used previously, and still gain that effect. So that is remarkable research that we're hearing here. Now, what would be the next step in this research in getting more human trials and such?
Well, obviously the next step, and the researchers even talk about this, is you would want to replicate these sort of findings in larger trials involving a greater number of subjects. But the working hypothesis based on this trial is that in the future, you could have combination therapy where by adding cannabinoids or vaporized cannabis as an adjunct pain-relieving therapy to standard or conventional opiates would allow these patients to, in the long term, reduce their use of opiates. And that is pivotally important because as you have talked about earlier, we've seen this explosion in the production and in the prescription of opiate-based painkillers. And along with that explosion, we have seen this terrible side effect of an explosion in opiate-related deaths. So anything we can do as a society to wean people off the use of opiates or lower their opiate regimen, but allow them to continue to find the same or even better levels of pain relief, is an avenue that we ought to be pursuing vigorously. And hopefully this particular study will lead to future larger clinical trials using these same methods. And I really would like to point out, too, that what also makes this study unique is that the subjects in the study did not smoke marijuana cigarettes, but they actually used a vaporizer and vaporized their marijuana. It's one of the very first studies I'm aware of to be conducted in the United States with federal government approval that used vaporization as a safe and effective marijuana delivery device in a clinical trial setting.
Yeah, this the prescription and, in my opinion, overprescription of OxyContin in our society is something I followed. It kind of has a personal appeal to me. My father has neuropathic pain, has drop foot, diabetes kind of thing, and has excruciating, that nerve pain in the feet. And he's in Idaho, so he's on OxyContin. He's taking a lot of these OxyContins, and we're seeing, I've done a number of posts on this. We're seeing more workers that are testing positive for oxycodone, even as tests for, workplace tests for marijuana are dropping. We're seeing, the DEA during the medical marijuana era, Purdue Pharma, it's very interesting. We've got the 15-year anniversary of Prop 215 this week. And in 1997 is when California really, started medical marijuana. People started actually getting their medicine legally. That kind of coincides with the OxyContin patent, going off generic and going into a patent here for Purdue Pharma in 1997. Since they've managed to turn that into a private prescription drug here, there's been a 1,200% increase in the production of OxyContin in the medical marijuana era. So while we can talk all about how it's good for patients, it's good for human people, maybe it's not so good for corporate people whose profits depend on selling and making a whole lot of OxyContin pills.
Sure, I think you saw this, Russ, but in 2010, there were 254 million prescriptions filled for opiate-based medications. Now, that's enough prescription filled to basically mean that every single adult in the United States of America had the ability to use either oxycodone or morphine or some of these opiate-based drugs. It is shocking how heavily and how readily these drugs are now prescribed, and we see that in the fact that the deaths now from opiate-based drugs have surpassed over 15,000 fatalities a year. And if you go back not very far, even just a decade ago, deaths attributed to the use of these drugs was relatively quite low compared to the numbers we're seeing now.
Yeah, and so many of the other collateral damage that can occur because of this overprescription. Of course, I've been to Orlando a couple of times in the past couple of years and spoken to the college kids at the University of Central Florida, and they tell me of the pill mills that they have down there in Florida. And the way they described them, it sounded like the way our opponents describe medical marijuana in California. Yeah, you can go to a shady little clinic and talk to a pain doc, tell them you got a little backache, and get yourself 500 OxyContin. So this is, a huge epidemic down there in the American Southeast and in other places in America as well. And I took a look at some of the National Survey on Drug Use and Health numbers about OxyContin, and they always try to make the argument that marijuana is the gateway drug. So, I correlated how trying marijuana related to monthly use of hard drugs, and then I did the same for OxyContin for people who had tried OxyContin and found a 5 times greater correlation for people who'd tried OxyContin to be hard drug users than marijuana users, and especially when we talk about heroin. So is there any way of estimating or recognizing how much damage to our society we're experiencing from this OxyContin epidemic, and how much would be relieved with the legalization of medical marijuana?
Well, as somebody who really tries to look at these issues objectively, when we're talking about the safety of a therapeutic substance under some sort of controlled use, we generally look at 2 fairly objective criteria. We look at risk of overdose death, and we look at toxicity to healthy organs and healthy cells. And certainly, as you know, and so many of your listeners know, we see relatively few, if any, toxicity issues associated with the cannabinoids, and we see no risk of fatal overdose. In my opinion, the biggest potential problem with the opiates is this risk of fatal overdose. And that is because there's a very narrow safety ratio. There's very little range between what you know of as the effective dose of a drug like, say, oxycodone and the potential lethal dose of a drug like oxycodone. So when you have very little range between the ED50 and the LD50, the dose where 50% of the subjects that take it that dose will feel a therapeutic effect versus the dose where 50% of the subjects that take it at that dose could die from taking it at that dose, it becomes very difficult to safely prescribe the medicine, more so when it's being prescribed for a condition like chronic pain, where a person is going to be taking the drug for a long, extended period of time, and when a person can become tolerant to the effects of the drug, like they can become tolerant to the pain-relieving effects of opiates, it then requires a physician, even when he's closely monitoring the patient, to increase the prescribed dosages of the drug. And any time that happens with a drug like oxycodone, you risk or you increase the risk of fatal overdose. We don't have those same risks associated with cannabis. So if cannabis can be used as an adjunct therapy for the treatment of these chronic pain conditions, these neuropathic pain conditions, and it can keep people at a low dosage of opiates or wean them off their dosage of opiates and maintain the same level of relief, it is simply going to create a safer environment, and it's going to make the prescription use of these conventional medicines, of these conventional opiates, safer in the long run as well.
Yeah, anything that we can do to reduce the harm. And again, it's not to say that opiates or oxycodone or any drug is a bad drug necessarily. It's just why overuse that tool when in conjunction with a safer tool, we can get a better result. And I think that's what we're all looking for here. Let me switch gears a little bit, Paul, and talk a little about these recent lawsuits that we've had in California. We talked about this on the Norml show on Monday and posted it on the front page. We've got Norml attorneys, Matt Cuman, and a couple of others that are filing suit in the 4 U.S. districts in California against this medical marijuana crackdown under the Obama administration. As someone who's living there in California and writing on these issues, and you even submitted some briefs and information for the trial, tell us about these suits and your participation in them.
Sure. There were suits filed in all 4 districts of California on Monday, and this was to address the efforts of the 4 U.S. attorneys for those respective districts in California that over the last month have made threats and have actually utilized criminal prosecution, threats of civil prosecution and civil forfeiture to go and try and create an environment in California where the existing production and distribution and use of marijuana for medical purposes frankly no longer exists. They've tried to go after the landlords who rent their property for the use of medical marijuana-related facilities. They've gone after the individuals who operate these facilities. They've gone after the individuals that grow cannabis for these facilities. They've gone after the financial institutions that hold accounts with these medical marijuana operators and providers. They've even threatened in some regions of California to go after the publishers that accept advertising revenue from these individuals and from these operators.
Do you feel like this is the biggest federal intrusion in California since you've been experiencing this issue?
It is definitely the most concerted federal intrusion. And what I mean is you see a full court press, not just from a single U.S. attorney, but all of the U.S. attorneys. Not just from one federal agency like the Department of Justice, but multiple federal agencies like the Department of Treasury and like the IRS and like the BATF, all of which are playing a role now to interfere with California's medical marijuana laws and with the way California attempts to regulate the production, sale, and use of medical marijuana. As I've said numerous times, if the federal government truly believes that there are operators in California that are violating the spirit, if not California law, then that is an issue that ought to be settled and dealt with by California law enforcement. It is still not a valid reason for the federal government to come in and try and prosecute individuals in an environment where those individuals would not even be allowed to raise the issue of medical marijuana or California's medical marijuana laws.
Yeah, as we've seen in too many cases, ranging from Jovan Jackson to Dr. Molly Fry and many, many, many others. Hey, Paul, that's about all the time we have for this segment, but I want to thank you for joining us here on Wednesday, taking Dr. Mitch's spot, and for all the great work you're doing and researching and testifying and adding your expertise to these lawsuits. We really appreciate it.
No problem, and I believe the affidavit that I wrote and filed in this case is available on the Norml website in the legal brief bank. Individuals can read the actual lawsuit that Norml's legal committee members filed in this case, and they can read a couple of affidavits. One is by me. The other is by Rick Doblin, the head of the group MAP, that talks about how the federal government has put up numerous roadblocks that make it very difficult, if not impossible, to actually study marijuana for medicinal purposes. So definitely folks ought to check those out as well.
All right. Thanks a lot, Paul. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again sometime.
Thank you.
All right. When we come back, time for a little bit of radical rant. I'm calling an audible on this one, though, so stay tuned.
Which of you are ready to admit to having used marijuana in the past? And they want us to go around and ask each of you. Senator Kerry, yes or no? Yes. Okay. Senator Edwards? Yes. Senator Lieberman?
I have a reputation for giving unpopular answers at Democratic debates. I never use marijuana. Sorry.
I think you'd probably be a lot cooler if you had, Senator.
Smoke a little pot, drink a little wine. Everything will be just fine. Smoke a little pot, drink a little
This is Norml Show Live.
Hey, this is Iva Cunningham. Check out my new show, A Different View, live Monday at 8 p.m. with a replay at 2 a.m., on Thursday at 8 a.m., and Saturday at 5 p.m.
Starfish Designs, makers of the original Gandalf.
I'm Radical Russ, and when I want to relax, I always have my 17-inch long original Gandalf from Starfish Designs nearby. The hand-blown borosilicate glass is strong and easy to clean, and the design is sleek and sophisticated. Starfish Designs are available from Bend, Oregon at a glass retailer near you. For locations, call 541-788-GLASS. That's 541-788-4527.
You want answers?
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
All right, folks, at the top of the show, I previewed the rant as saying I was going to talk about weed maps. I'm going to save that for later because I still have a little bit more research to do. Don't get all conspiracy theory or anything. I'm just not ready. It'll come out. But in the meantime, I have this other rant that I had prepared, doing some research this morning because I've been following this Occupy movement and the whole thing about the greed of the 1%. Of course, with having Wiz Khalico as our intern, I learned a whole lot about the whole issue of corporate personhood and the money in politics, et cetera, and all that. So I found this article that was up on Mother Jones Magazine. It was from last year, September, I think. And it was called Capitol Hill's Top 75 Corporate Sponsors. And it was based on tallying up their campaign contributions for lobbying efforts from 1989 through 2010. So like the past 20 years of corporate, I call them corporate sponsors, right? It ought to be like NASCAR. They ought to have to wear the patches on their suits, right? But, so I thought it would be interesting to go through this list of 75, the top 75 corporations donating and controlling money, to Washington in lobbying over the past 20 years. Out of those top 75, how many of them wouldn't want to see marijuana legalized? Okay, so we start with the titans of big banking and finance. That'd be number 3, Goldman Sachs, number 5, Citigroup, number 10, American Bankers Association, number 14, JP Morgan Chase, number 16, Morgan Stanley, number 23, Bank of America, number 24, Ernst & Young, number 28, Deloitte Touche Tohmatsu, number 29, PricewaterhouseCoopers, number 30, UBS, number 35, Merrill Lynch, number 40, Credit Suisse, number 44, American Financial Group, number 51, MBNA, which is now part of Bank of America, and number 63, the Security Industries and Financial Markets Association. Now, who really knows if the titans of big finance are strong-arming politicians to maintain marijuana prohibition? I mean, they got a lot of other issues to deal with, from regulation to bailouts and all that. So why would they care if the herb is forbidden? Well, if you've read the Guardian's piece on the $378 billion worth of money that was laundered by Wachovia Bank for Mexican drug traffickers, or if you read Bloomberg's report on Bank of America's financing of 3 planes for traffickers to transport 10 tons of cocaine into America, you begin to see the motivation to keep that steady flow of illicit cash into the world finance system. Now, another group you might consider wouldn't want to see marijuana legalized, big pharma and healthcare. Number 6, the AMA. Number 20, Pfizer. Number 25, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Number 27, the American Hospital Association. Number 31, Aflac. Number 45, GlaxoSmithKline. Number 62, the American Healthcare Association. Number 66, Eli Lilly. And number 74, Bristol Myers Squibb. Now, despite the American Medical Association's recent call to remove cannabis from Schedule 1, they still make the list because their only reason for that call is they want to have more free access to study the cannabinoids within cannabis to make pharmaceuticals out of them. So that, they still have a reason to keep it as Schedule 2 or Schedule 3, right? So that would still hurt us. And it's obvious why most of these companies would wish to not see their patients growing their own medicine that would reduce their need for prescription meds they sell and lead to fewer doctor's visits. Another group of these top 75 corporate donors over the past 20 years to Washington, D.C. lobbying, big alcohol and tobacco. Number 9, Altria, which until recently was one of, I think, called Philip Morris. Number 12, the National Beer Wholesalers Association. Number 36, Reynolds American, formerly R.J. Reynolds, the tobacco company. Number 41, Anheuser-Busch. And number 52, UST, which is U.S. Smokeless Tobacco. That's chew, right? And the motivations are transparent for the purveyors of these legal recreational substances. While you can grow your own tobacco and brew your own beer, it's time and labor intensive. Why would they wish to compete with a recreational substance the customer can grow on their own? They don't. So much so that they were among the initial funders, along with Big Pharma, for the Partnership for a Drug-Free America. The next group that might have a problem with marijuana getting legalized, big defense contractors. Number 18, Lockheed Martin. Number 19, General Electric. Number 33, Boeing. Number 37, Northrop Grumman. And number 43, General Dynamics. I know you're thinking, defense contractors? But think it out. When you sell weapons of war, you got to have an armed enemy fighting back at you to maintain production. That enemy needs ammunition and weapons, and they need the ready cash to purchase those illegal arms on the black market. So when you learn about how the opium trade fuels the Taliban in Afghanistan and how cocaine trafficking is making allies of Colombian rebels and Al-Qaeda terrorists and how marijuana is setting up the next big shooting war just south of us in Mexico, you realize that these corporations can't have global drug prohibition unraveling by that first step of marijuana legalization. And then finally, the last of the big 75 top contributors to lobbying in Washington, D.C. over the past 20 years, big energy. Number 46, Chevron. Number 49, ExxonMobil. And number 75, Enron, which, of course, doesn't exist anymore. I mean, think about how many times you've heard somebody, especially remember back in the Bush era, talk about switchgrass or algae or corn ethanol or natural gas or clean coal. I'm sorry. Phrase always makes me cough. Everybody recognizes the need for alternative fuels to end our reliance on oil. So it seems inconceivable that these companies would resist development of hemp seed oil, the original fuel for the original diesel engine. But if they've already invested in other alternative fuel sources, why legalize hemp and create competitors or a need to redirect their investments? Besides, they've still got plenty of oil left to sell and in products that you've never even thought of. Your plastic goods, pesticides and fertilizers for your food, building materials, plus a few dozen other products whose manufacturers wouldn't need to buy petroleum if they had cheaper, sustainable hemp seed oil, plastics, and such to replace it with. Oh, and I ended too early. There's one more corporation, one more corporate group that probably wouldn't want to see marijuana legalized. Big agribusiness. Number 69, Archer Daniels Midland. Second only to oil in the who knew it was in so much stuff category is corn. High fructose corn syrup accounts for about half of all sugars in the American diet. It's in your ketchup, for Pete's sake. There's also a symbiotic relationship between the food industry producing ethanol for big energy and the returned favor of producing pesticides and herbicides for big agribusiness. A flourishing hemp industry would produce hemp seed oil for energy, and the remaining hemp seed becomes nutritious protein for people and livestock. Even the remaining farmers of other crops would use less fertilizers because those farmers could use hemp as a rotational crop and revitalize their soil naturally. So remember, even though a slim majority of 300 million American people would like to see the end of marijuana prohibition, a slim majority of the 75 biggest corporate people probably would rather keep things the way they are. There's your Radical Rant, and you can get a copy of that available up at our blog, stash.norml.org, the top federal corporate sponsors who don't want marijuana legalized, with links to many of these points that I have made, if you'd like to make the arguments as well. All available at our blog, stash.norml.org. We will get to the Weed Maps rant at another time after I get my research done. Also, got to let everybody know schedule changes here coming up this Friday. No live show. I will be in Atlanta. I'll be flying to Atlanta for the Cannabis Capital Jam, whatever it's called. Next week, we've got a full lineup of shows, Monday through Friday. The week after that, Thanksgiving week, no shows. And the first week of December, no shows. We're taking a 2-week holiday break. Long deserved. Maybe I can get my voice back. So for Cannabis Carry and everybody here at the Norml Foundation, thanks for joining us for Norml Show Live. If you're listening live, stay tuned for Hour 2, our Toker Talk Radio, where we take live calls and discuss more news and interesting stuff of the day. Sometimes we even venture away from the marijuana topic. We take your calls at 971-533-7111. If you have comments or questions or concerns for the show, send them to me by email, stash@norml.org. You can follow the Norml Network on Twitter @NormalNet. Follow me @RadicalRuss. And for those of you listening on the podcast, we will talk to you tomorrow. On tomorrow's show, we've got Captain Joe Brooks from LEAP. Finally, he'll be on the air with us. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is Norml Show Live, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Take it out one more time. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.